So Karthik, please go ahead. Feel free to introduce yourself and let me know how I can help you throughout this presentation as well.
Sure. I'm just going to share my screen and walk through my presentation. But before that, I just want to make sure that everybody is comfortable just interrupting me at any point in time.
We'll do it.
If you have a question, just raise your hand, or just easier to talk about things as we are going through different topics, so that we can kind of interrupt me, and that's no kind of like I need to finish the presentation. So let's talk about any of the topics which you feel you didn't get. Talk about anything which you think is valuable to you and you want to dig in a little more. You want to ask some more pointed questions about it. Feel free to stop me at any time. Yeah. So with that, I'll share my. Okay, I don't know what I shared.
It's coming up. It's taking a second. Well, now it stopped.
Okay. Oh yeah, the share. Okay. Now I'm hoping you can see my screen.
Yes.
Which is Land Accelerator. So what I'm going to be talking about today is developing a customer-driven business, and maybe just a quick introduction about myself. I run Sangam Ventures. We are mainly focused around helping or working with startups that are tackling climate change. And for that, I think one of the biggest things to focus on is to help your customers make sustainable decisions when they are choosing to make things they want. You as entrepreneurs, the climate or trying to help with restoring land, a lot of it then comes down to your ability to help customers, producers make better choices, right? So, and that's our focus. Why to us this idea of developing.
No, Karthik, your voice is breaking up. Do you think we should try to turn off the video?
Yeah, as in, you want me to turn off my video?
I think so. Yeah, it's breaking up. Let's see if it makes it better.
Yeah, sure. Is it better now?
Keep talking and I'll let you know.
Maybe I'll like move my laptop a little closer. Oops, I think my Siri is also talking to me. Is it better now?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so I think from a startup building a new business or solution perspective, one of the biggest reasons that a lot of startups fail is because what they're building does not meet a market need, or there is no market need that basically is being kind of solved by the product they're bringing out, right? So, and a lot of times that basically means that you as an entrepreneur have not kind of spent enough time going through a customer discovery journey, right? So I think the first thing to do as an entrepreneur is to basically kind of start with trying to work towards a product market fit. What that means is, one, going through this process of customer validation, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, and discovery, where you basically need to go find the right customer and then go and validate that the problem that you're looking to solve is the right problem, and then the solution that you're bringing to the customer is what they're looking for. And then once you have that, then you kind of optimize for making sure that you can be profitable, you can make money selling that solution to the customer, and then basically seeing if you can repeat it to build a business, right? So you do it once, you do it multiple times, you have a repeatable model, you have a business, right? So first you create the customer, then you create your company. So you need to get to that product market fit. And a lot of that is to do with customer discovery and customer validation. right? And so in your startup journey, the first two steps in the most simplest questions is who will buy your product, right? Who's your customer? And why would they buy? Why would people buy your solution or product or service? And solving for those two can basically make the biggest difference in the success of your business. Right? So what we want to do is today go through a process of how to go look for your customers and figure out if you are solving the right problem for your customers. So the first step to that is actually to get out of the door. You really want to kind of go and talk to a customer or talk to multiple customers and kind of validate that they are actually in need of whatever you're building, and also that they would be interested in buying that, right? So don't make assumptions, don't kind of try to be in your customer's shoes. None of those really help. The only way to do it is to kind of get out of the door, go and be where your customers are, and basically spend time talking to them. And I'll talk about a few ways in which you can kind of extract what they are looking for or what they would like to have as a solution to the problem you're trying to solve, right? So you need to go find customers in pain. In this photo, it's basically about like farmers who are basically growing tomatoes, but then when they come to the market, they just don't have a good price for their tomatoes, so they might as well just throw it on the market floor and just go away, right? So I think you want to find those customers who are really kind of hassled by the product or solution they have today, and they want something better, right? So here's a great example. Customer who basically has bought a subsidized electric pump, but then there's no electricity in the village, so she can't really use the pump, right? So that customer, can you give her a solution that works better, right? And if you can't get to your customers, and there are a lot of scenarios where maybe you're a founder sitting somewhere far away from your customers, and you need to kind of find some way for you to kind of get faster feedback, in which case you can look for like analogs, right? So one of the things that we always talk about is, college students or, people who have very little money and need to kind of figure out what to do with that are like great analogs for like poor people or like lower middle income people who also kind of have a very constrained wallet, right? So if you can find analogs, then it works. But otherwise, you need to go find your customers and you have to spend time with them, right? So first step, who's your customer? Identify and describe your customer. And that basically I'll talk about in the end is basically defining a customer persona, right? And the important part is to describe them in all kinds of ways, visually, from their emotions perspective, in terms of their expectations, aspirations, all of that, right? So really kind of getting into who your customer is or are is very important. The second step is to understand their pain point, right? What is the job that they're trying to get done, and what is the problem they're facing trying to get it done, right? Make sure you can put that down on paper and be able to kind of explain it in the simplest way, right? So then what is the solution they're using today, or how are they dealing with this problem today, and what would make their life easier, right? So I'm still not coming into the solution space. I'm just trying to ask, what are the alternative ways in which they can solve their problem, and staying with the problem before you get into, and the customer before you get into like trying to find a solution, right? So ask a lot of questions. And then once you have all of that, the way to kind of go through customer development is to actually propose or show and tell some solutions. Somebody mentioned like, going through trial and error. It's not so much trial and error. It's just basically show and tell and basically taking feedback, right? So the more you kind of go through that process, your customers will tell you, or they'll become your product guys who will tell you exactly what they're looking for. And that's a great way for you to kind of come up with a product or a solution that makes sense for them, right? But you need to get out of the door, right? So now I talked about, kind of defining your customer in a very kind of visceral, visual way. And the reason for that is this, right? As startup founders, a lot of us are kind of biased towards kind of getting into like market share and market size, and those are important. So you want to have a meaningful size of market that you want to attack. But when you are doing customer development, when you are basically in the initial stages of your startup journey, you really want to be able to pinpoint a certain group of customers within that overall customer base and be able to define them in a very clear way such that they become a very small subset of your overall customer base, right? So think of it like it's a pepperoni piece on your pizza rather than a slice of your pizza, right? Everybody kind of talks about 10% of market. Don't do that, right? Talk about within farmers who basically grow banana. We really want to work with farmers who have plots of less than 1 acre, ideally growing banana in Northeast region, right? So be very specific about the customer that you want to target so that you are able to kind of get into exactly how you're going to solution, right? So here's an example of a customer persona. He's basically Kumar. He's a tribal farmer from Jharkhand. He has a wife, 6-year-old son, small plot of land. He cultivates vegetables, but when he can't, he basically goes looking for day jobs in the construction sector. Most of the time, he uses subsidized kerosene pumps for irrigation, right? That's a great way to kind of define a bit more holistically who your customer is. And then you can say, how many such people are there similar to Kumar, and build your initial customer pepperoni on your pizza, right? And then you can define their pain points, how you can basically kind of solve for each of those pain points, right? Similarly, again, right, like there's another smallholder farmer, kind of defining their family, their plot size, what are they growing, how much money do they make, what are their pain points again, right? So be able to define it and then say how many such farmers can you work with similar to Gauramma, right? That's the important part I want you to get to. So define individual customers, do 5 to 10 of these exercises where you define, yes, this customer is interested in engaging with us and is looking for a solution for a problem they are facing, and they would like to work with us, and make 10 of these, and then say how many such customers are there who fit a similar profile, right? That's basically your customer discovery journey. Customer development, customer discovery is not market research, right? It's not about like going, Tamil Nadu has, 1 lakh, farmers doing banana cultivation. Of that, we will get 5%, right? That's market research. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is basically going after individual customers, understanding their needs, understanding their behaviors, understanding their aspirations, figuring out what is their biggest pain point, and then solving for that. Any questions so far?
I have a question is basically wanted to know if anybody in the room, you can raise your hand at any time. Anybody in the room has done customer profiles before, or if they've just thought about or heard about customer profiles, but really haven't done it. So I'm wondering just if anybody has actually done it. How about that first one? Has anybody actually done a customer profile before? You can raise your hand in the reaction zone, or you can just say if you had a story of doing it, if it helped you out. So again, just looking to maybe hear from that. If you don't say anything now, think about it later for the question and answer session. Okay.
So Siddharth here again.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, so we did something equivalent to what Mr. Chandrasekhar just explained. Uh, so we identify when we were trying to sell solar products in the rural markets. The first thing that we did was to do a customer survey to understand if there was what kind of product to develop. But afterwards, when we failed in explaining or in expanding into that market, after developing a product that the market said that they would buy this product, we didn't know who will buy the product, who had the money to buy the product. So we then did the profiling of what kind of customer are we looking for, who will buy the product. And we narrowed it down to one taluka, or which is one subsection of one sub-district region, to 3-4 villages, to about 2 bank branches that were catering to these villages. So that's where we started focusing on. And while we wrote a good paper on it, we couldn't make a good business out of it. So that's how we could. I mean, that's a lesson that we learned on, first in product development, and second is customer development. Essentially to geographically narrow it down, and then narrow it down, because the pain point was they wanted a banker to fund the product. So essentially to go down by the region, geographically narrowed down, and then narrowed down to maybe 1 or 2 public sector banks which were more open to such an idea. So that's where our cash ended, and that's where we had to put our foot down.
Thanks for sharing, Siddharth. I think that's a very great example also of external forces that also become part of your solution or problem space, right? Like access to finance or financing. And so you could think about also, defining your customers in those aspects, right? Customers who work in regions where a particular bank is operating, or customers, and that's how Selco started, right? Selco basically started off with operations in Karnataka, and they were successful relatively in Karnataka, mainly because there were like regional rural banks that created mandates within Karnataka to basically provide financing for solar homes.
Yes,
right?
yes,
And I think those externalities are also something to understand and manage, and be able to kind of see if they're part of the problem set or the solution set, right? If they're part of the problem set, then you need to kind of come up with something that of your own that might help scale your solution, which might be like, hey, our product needs to come right? And the other side, you think it's part of the solution space, then you need to kind of operate in areas which make sense, right? Like pay as you go kind of went crazy in Africa before other parts of the world, mainly because the mobile money ecosystem was there before any other place, right? So I think a lot of external aspects also kind of provide you with the opportunities for building solutions for customers. Anil, you had something? Thanks, Siddharth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anyway, feel free to...
Yeah, I'm Ravinder from Nutraceutical Rich Organic India. Karthik, actually, there are something which I need to understand.
Sure.
As the farmers, as you're viewing them as a customer, like it can be a customer for many people, but for us, they're producer. So once they're producing something like millets in our case, and we'll also be expanding into Mahua honey in the days to come. So they are the producer from our side. So definitely there is a need to identify the producers also, in terms of who will be partnering with us and in this journey, and taking and then making a product and then reaching out to the customer. So customer in our end is basically urban based
Sure.
community right now, right?
Sure.
So how we can actually then work in that scenario?
I think in that scenario, your life is the easiest, right? Like farmers are hard to understand and they have very complex lives, and they work with a lot of risk, a lot of like kind of uncertainty, which makes them hard to kind of sell to at times. But urban consumers are very well understood and very well defined and sectioned and segregated, right? And so think of it in two ways. One is you're just a retail business. And in your case, it's very important to basically understand your customers and your positioning with the customers on why they would buy, right? So do you basically kind of focus on a specific type of products or a specific type of positioning within the market? All of that is going to make a difference, right? Like what price point you sell at would make a difference to who buys your product, right? The other bit to think about is that you are actually providing a marketing solution to the farmers, right? Or these producers. The value, why they would sell it to you versus just directly selling it to somebody, is that you basically you're providing the branding, you're providing a couple of other things which allows them, which could be like, money up front, or like, payment within a certain period of time, or a better price. All of that is value that you would generate to the farmer, at which point they would be, you can call them suppliers, you can call them customers, but that would be, you're a marketing company for them. Right. And there is a lot of cases within the FPO ecosystem where there are marketing companies that cater to a specific FPO, and the FPO is the customer, right? The focus is on basically ensuring that the FPO can sell as much of their produce as possible. But I think first and foremost, I think for you, you are a marketing company, so you need to kind of focus on the end customers, which is what will drive the most value to everybody in the ecosystem.
Right, right. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so
much. If I may ask another question, please.
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay, this is going to sound a bit cheeky. So the thing is, if we were to sell to these rural customers, at least we have some immediate access. We could go to a panchayat and we could immediately speak to 50, 60 farmers, and that's possible. It's doable. The challenge comes when we are looking for HNI customers. So if I wanted to sell something to you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, where would I find people like you? So to interview you or to get time from you to understand whether if this kind of a market or a product, or especially related to carbon sequestration, might interest you. So how do we find B2B decision makers and HNIs who might be interested in something like this? What's the network that we should be looking forward to?
Sure. I think what you want to do is kind of break it down even further, right? Like, I think just kind of, and I might not be a HNI, by the way, breaking it down just by HNI or non-HNI doesn't really help, right? It's about, what are these customers' spending habits? Are they ones who basically always go to a specific type of store? Do they buy some specific type of products? Do they basically hang out in specific type of ecosystems, right? Would they buy nutraceutical products from Ravinder, right? If you basically can find and understand what these customers do, you will find channels by which you can reach them, right? And what you want is basically just a way to reach them and a way to kind of intrigue them to maybe take a survey or basically say, yes, I am interested, I would like to talk to you, right? The easier thing to do in a startup phase is to actually use referrals, right? Find some HNI friends, ask them to connect you to a few other HNI friends of theirs, and build it from a viral referral kind of basis to first start off, right? And tell them like, hey, I want to have you connect me to some HNI friends, but not in the same city. Give me like other cities, or I want some diversity. I want like some women in this pool. So ask, right? And asking is the easiest way for you to find these people from different places, right? Obviously, you can also try putting up ads, landing pages, other things, use their standard social media channels to be able to kind of interact with them, right? Like being able to communicate, see who else who is interested in the things that you're doing. So you might have to kind of do a webinar or do a session where you're building awareness on what you're doing and see who else joins, right? So a great place would be, where are you based out of, Siddharth?
From Mumbai.
You're from Mumbai, right? Like go and go to your local Thai group and say, hey, I want to basically present to the Thai ecosystem, right? There'll be a whole bunch of these charter members who are all HNIs.
Sure, certainly. That's good advice, sir. Thank you so much.
You just got to hustle.
Yeah. Yes, that's a skill to be learned yet. But yes.
Yeah. Skill number one. All right. So I'll continue, but feel free to interrupt me again. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks. Yes.
So now, in terms of, so I talked about like customer development is not market research, right? I think a lot of you are getting it now. The other bit is basically customer development is not product development, right? Like don't jump into the solution space. What you're trying to do is to figure out what is the end state that the customer is looking to get to, right? What is the job to be done? What are they trying to achieve with the problem to get to the other side, right? So a great example is basically, does this customer want a drilling machine, right? They don't really want a drilling machine. They just want a hole in the wall, right? And they want a specific size of hole in the wall. So I think understanding what the customer wants, which is a hole in the wall, rather than kind of coming up with like, hey, I want to make a drilling machine, or I want to make like give a hammer and nail or anything else, doesn't really help, right? And there's a link to the article which really gets into like understanding what jobs to be done means. And this is a phrase coined by Clayton Christensen. And it's really useful if you stay with this idea of jobs to be done rather than trying to figure out like a product or a solution, right? So spend more time with the customers around jobs to be done versus trying to get into a product development mindset, right? So because what customers, if you ask them what is the product they need, they will give you answers which is within their thought process of how they think of the world, right? So if you ask people when there were no cars, what would they want? They would say, we want faster horses, or like, ways by which we don't have to stop to feed our horses or something like that, right? But actually what they want is just to get from A to B in a faster way, in a more convenient way, without having to like live with the horse, right? But so jobs to be done is more about what is the thing that the customers want to achieve or get done, right? So this is a great example of like jobs to be done, where I think NASA spent a lot of time and money trying to figure out how to make ball pens work in zero gravity, and then came up with this space pen, which Fisher built for them. And this was like, kind of a piece of American history, and it works in space, and you can take notes. But like, what's the job to be done, right? It's basically, I want to take notes, or I need to basically log something somewhere, right? So then, the Russians came up with the space pencil, right? So you can just use a pencil, not very hard to kind of come up with an alternative solution, which is a lot cheaper. Or you can basically now, in today's universe, most probably just do a voice recording and have that translated into text, right? So if you stay more in the problem space, it'll give you an opportunity to come up with better alternatives, which might be cheaper and faster to do, and would be something that's meaningful to the customers, rather than spending a lot of time on some engineering problem, which the customer doesn't really care about, right? But the thing to do once you're kind of into the solutioning space, or you're trying to kind of eke out what the customer would like, is to actually give the customer something tangible, either in their hands or in the form of a storyboard, or in a way that they can visualize how something would work, and be able to kind of understand if that's something that's solving their problem, right? Like a great example is when IBM was trying to figure out if their translation software would be something that's interesting to customers. Instead of building the translation software, they just had a customer speak into the mic, and there was a lady in the other room who was typing it out on the computer. And obviously there are mistakes, whatever, but then the customer basically kind of said this is something that would be extremely useful to them if the level of mistakes were just a little bit lower or a little bit better, right? So basically getting that feedback cost most probably like a typist and a microphone and a few things that cost like maybe $100 all in, right? Or like maybe 50,000 rupees or something like that, right? Like it's not that expensive to test out and understand if this is something that customers would want, right? The same thing you can also do in something called prototyping, which is basically kind of trying to make something in an inexpensive way with the least amount of time, but to get the most amount of feedback with the customer experiencing the product or solution, right? And what that does is it, I think somebody talked about it, usability, right? Understanding the usability, the appeal of the product or the solution to the customer, and is it how they are going to use it? What is the specific use cases that they would come up with? And would they continue to use it? Would they buy it? At what price? All of those you can basically discover through some simple prototyping, right? And prototyping doesn't need to be just about you creating a physical product. It could basically be faking something or telling them about it and seeing what their behavior would be like. It could be storyboarding and kind of explaining to them how something would work, and then seeing how you can do it, right? But the idea of prototyping is to basically do it in a couple of hours or a couple of days, not in a couple of months, right? So just doing those exercises, and you can basically just storyboard, like put some of these on paper and show it to a customer and talk to them about it, so that it helps them understand what you are thinking about, right? And so does everybody kind of get this idea of prototyping versus prototyping, and like, making sure that you spend as much time getting as much information and feedback from your customers? I'm going to assume that's a yes. If somebody does not, please stop me and we can talk about it. Or if you think it doesn't apply to your business, we can talk about that as well, right? Now,
if I may ask a question on this, please.
Sure, Scott.
Right. So, so when you say prototyping over here, essentially we're talking about planting trees, reforestation, which is kind of an established way of saying, okay, that's one way of carbon sequestration here. Uh, uh, I, I would find it hard to understand how further we can do a prototype on this.
No, so I think there are different aspects to some of these, right? So if you think about it from a planting trees perspective, I'm assuming you are either talking about agroforestry or you're talking about growing trees on marginal lands,
Yes.
or you're basically actually doing like forestry, like full forestry, right?
Correct,
So
yes.
what you could do is actually do a storyboard where, say, you take a customer's region and then delineate and say, here is where you would grow trees, right? And in 3 years or 5 years, this is what you will have as a tree base within your community. And here is basically how you will be able to extract value out of these trees, whether they are fruiting trees or they are for wood or whatever they are for. You will be able to kind of give them a visual sense of, because you're doing long-term projects, what would this mean for all of you, right? Because what you want is for the customer to kind of be able to visualize today, if they invested in planting trees, what would their life look like 10 years from now, right?
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks again for that. Yes.
Right, and lot of value is created when you help people visualize exactly what they will get in the long term. But also it's kind of one of those things where you also allow for the customers to potentially add in or paint a picture on top of it, right? So you might be talking about, hey, we can plant trees here, and they might be like, hey, if we could add some shrubs, maybe we'll have some goats as well hanging out in these regions, right? So they will add on to your product solution, and that's where the early adopters are super valuable as well, right? Like people who will engage with you, help you visualize, add their aspects of what they are thinking about the solution space onto what you're doing. And that can really help in building your long-term vision of what your customers would like to see, right? And those are the guys who will engage with you and come up with better ways of doing things, right? So if you're planting trees and you say, hey, we're going to do them like a meter apart, and then you can actually go to the customer site and just put chalk and show them where these trees would be planted, right? You don't have to plant the trees, you just need to like use some chalk, which is a cheap way of showing how their tree plantation might look like, right? And so that's basically, the idea is to engage customers through this process and help them jump in and want to work with you, right? And so the slide that I'm talking about now is basically that, right? You will have some customers who are like, I don't get it, right? Or this is great, but I don't know if this will work for me, right? But there'll be a few that will jump on board and say, oh, what about this? And what about that? And like, how can we kind of do something more? And those are your early adopters, right? So they know they have an opportunity or a problem. They know they want to kind of do something about it, and they will actively work with you to kind of problem solve or like come up with new ideas, right? So those are the ones that you want in the early days, and all of these are like kind of brainstorming tools where you can bring them into your space or go in and get engaged in what they are doing to be able to kind of come up with solutions, right? So they want to be able to, experiment with whatever you're doing, work with you on that, freely share what they are thinking, They will have to take a little bit of risk and potentially even pay for it, right? And a lot of passionate customers will do that for you, right? And the point of that customer discovery process is to go through this, right? And I think in the beginning, somebody talked about like, hey, usability is a problem, we need to come up with customization for a lot of customers, right? I think what you want to do in your early days is to basically come up with a simple solution that at least a decent number of customers will take without customization or without too much customization. Because if you have too much customization, then you're basically in like either a consultancy kind of space, or you're going to have serious problems scaling, right? So what you want is, if there is an aspect where the customer can add on to what you're doing, so you leave some of the aspects of the solutioning to the customer, that is great. But outside of that, I would recommend not having like too many options which you need to provide to the customers, because that's just going to create a bottleneck in terms of coming up with something. And the customer might want something today, which they may not want later, all of that, right? So you want to kind of get something that's at least within a certain group of customers. So that's why I keep saying 5, 10 numbers, because I think unless you have a meaningful sample set, and a meaningful sample set can be like 30 to 50, you want to get to a solution which a 30 to 50 kind of customer base actually likes and wants to work with, right? Without customization, right? That's when you have a scalable product or a solution that you can work with, right? And you might have to figure out like what Siddharth talked about in terms of financing. You might have to figure out what are these other externalities that might also need to be accounted for, which might be part of the customer discovery process or aspects of the customers that you need to understand, right? So ideally, you want to kind of engage with these guys yourself as founders. If you have product managers or people who are building the solution, have them go with you, but make sure that you're also there, right? Make sure you listen, understand, analyze as much of what they are saying, and then implement what is necessary, right? The necessary part is the important thing. Don't create too much of functionality too early, because the more functionality you have, the more opportunities you have of failure, right? So what you want is what is, in entrepreneurial, jargon is called minimum viable product, but the idea is just provide them with something that gets the job done, right? So basically, most passionate people who want to work with you, who want to work with your product, who will then basically go out and talk about how awesome your solution is going to be the most valuable customers that you can have, right? If there are people who won't engage with you, they are not the best customers to have, right? Don't keep chasing customers who don't seem to be interested in working with you. You want to spend some time trying to engage, but see the level of passion they have for what you're doing, right? And the journey is not a straightforward one. So you want to kind of keep going through that process multiple times. If you need to change direction, feel free to change direction. Early days is the best time for you to do some of this discovery process before you start basically driving for repeatability and scale and building your company. Questions? All right. So I think the main thing sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Karthik, sorry. Actually, instead of question, I just wanted to share my story of the product journey. As you know that we have been making millet-based cookies, right? So what we have started with the initial stages that we have not analyzed in terms of in which market segment we'll be going and where we'll be selling the products and all those things. That research was not done initially at when the product development stage. I would just like to tell you how it actually went on. I'm not even from the food background when I actually building this product. What happened that I just choose those ingredients which are mostly rain fed and they're naturally coming out to be organic, right? And which farmers are doing it and they are comfortable and they are rain fed also. Like the amaranth, we added finger millet, we added barnyard millet, and with all these things together we added barley, and all these ingredients we have added, and then we created a cookie with the very natural ingredients. Instead of like refined, we use the cow ghee in that clarified butter. So ultimately the result came out to be a product which is far more costlier than you cannot even imagine, which is presently available in the market, right? But we went ahead with this, and people started appreciating it from the day one, and slowly we have built a good numbers of customers on e-commerce platform. So definitely there's a long way to go, and there's a lot many products which we need to come up with. But I just want to share my journey, that if you want something, if you're very eager and passionate about to build something, then definitely there are people who are in the world will be needing it, that also. So that's it. I just want to share this. Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I think that was my network.
I hope you have listened to me, Karthik.
Yeah, almost most of it. Can you just repeat the last bit where you said after the product was prohibitively expensive and then you had to go back?
Yeah, so we product was expensive, but the kind of ingredients which we have actually utilized in making it is all kind of superfood, which is amaranth and coconut powder, and we have used cow desi ghee, barley, finger millet, barnyard millet. So combining all this together were also to create a need. Is long back in 2018 I've created this. So there is a need to create value for all these products, which was non-existent at that moment, right?
So then what was your customer discovery?
The discovery is that product is doing very fine, and people are appreciating it. It's doing great on e-commerce segment also. So I just want to say that if you're passionate about something, then definitely people will going to like that also. That is also one of the point. But in my case, it actually worked. Yes.
Sure. So I think maybe I'll take your example itself, Ravinder, right? So when you said, hey, we are using mostly superfoods, we are basically kind of, a lot of your ingredients have like a certain level of protein content, certain level of like carb content, right? Looks like a great opportunity for you to look at, say, breakfast cereal bars or other ways of presenting your product to a different niche group of customers, right? Versus cookies, which are kind of in the dessert and sweets category, right? Like breakfast bars have the same amount of sugar. It's just in terms of perception, something that's looked at as like an energy bar or something that's looked at as a breakfast cereal is kind of considered more in the healthy domain versus the dessert domain, right? So I think there are opportunities always to kind of reposition and rethink things that might, you might be doing well, but you might do better, right? So I think as an entrepreneur, you want to kind of keep going back to trying to figure out how do you kind of reposition, rethink about who are your customers, see if you can add to your customer base or improve your customer base, right? So I think when I was showing you that pepperoni on a pizza versus a slice of the pizza, the idea is, can you jump from one pepperoni to the next on the pizza, right? So one customer base might be people who like to have healthy cookies with their coffee or tea versus, kind of jumping to customers who are looking for like a breakfast cereal bar solution.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You have actually given me a lot of ideas. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think I was almost at the end of my presentation. So feel free to, oops, I don't know why this keeps doing that. Yeah, there you go. Feel free to stop me and we can just have a discussion. I know there are quite a few participants on the, so I think the idea for you as entrepreneurs is to basically find customers, make them happy, see if you can repeat that as many times as possible, right? The more customers you have, the happier customers you have, the more you have an opportunity to grow your business. As simple as that. That's the first step to anything you're going to build entrepreneurially, right? Like you can have lots of funding, you can have a whole bunch of other things, but if you have a business where you have a big potential customer base that you can make really happy, who are willing to pay for your product or solution, you have a winning opportunity to build a business, right? What this will help you really is to reduce your risk and also improve the way you build your business, right? You will spend less time and less money trying to figure out building a product. You will need less resources in terms of also trying to figure out how to reach your customer, because the more time you spend with your customers, you will know what's the best way to reach your customer, right? So do the customer development, do the validation, and then get into product development. And your product development, again, needs to be mainly about this idea of jobs to be done first before you get into anything related to engineering, marketing, or in the solution space, right? So if you had like one takeaway from today's session, spend time trying to define or show in a very simple and good way who your customer is and what would make them buy, right? Those are the two key things that are important for you in your startup journey. If you figure these two out, the rest of it, I think, is way more easy than anything else, right? And here's an example of a set of questions for you to build a customer canvas, right? So it again starts with their persona, what do they do, what's their socioeconomic background, all of that. And then what's the job that they're trying to get done, what are they using today, what are their pain points with that, and then two things around necessities, like what is it exactly that if they got done, they will be happier versus nice to haves, and then basically thinking about aspirations, what would make them excited about the opportunity that you're providing them, right? Is there something that will get them to customer delight, right? So spending time just on thinking about these questions, going out and, building a questionnaire, spending time with your customers. There is nothing wrong in, printing this out, putting it on a piece of paper and actually asking these questions and getting the answers to them, right? How often have you gone and asked the customer, what do you do? Like, what does your family look like? What is it that you're feeling today? Like, what would make you happy? right? I think that's the most important part. Yeah. And quite a bit of the stuff that we've taken out from today's session comes from the first book, actually, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. It's a very simple, small, thin book. I highly recommend all of you to read it. It's maybe a one-day's read, but really worth it. And it's very simple. Yeah. So it's not about trying to define your customers and being able to put them in words. It's more about getting to know them really well, so that when you are basically talking about your customers, it really comes out that you know who your customers are, right? All right, that's the end of my session. I'm going to stop sharing, but I can always bring back the deck. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, feel free.
Sure, Karthik. So first want to thank you and let everybody know that the attendance sheet has been put in the chat box. So go ahead and check on that and provide your feedback, fill it out while we have this question and answer session today. I just want to thank Karthik for a lot of the resources and tools that he's provided. And we'll be putting the slides up on Mighty Network within the next 24 hours. So Karthik, if you send those to me at the end, we'll put the PDF up so people can reference that. Especially, I like the really last slide you had that seemed to really pull everything together with, meaningful questions that people can ask. You don't have to start from scratch. You can just start to know your people and go from there. I know, just from my point of view, investors have always said, yes, it's really, really great that you have a market size chart and you want to get to 5% of it. Like, that is a small piece of knowledge. You should have it in your deck. But it's more important, what are you doing today and how are you actually growing your own customer base? And Karthik, maybe as with your investor hat on, what is your thoughts, when you see pitch decks and it has, market size, and then what's a strong kind of argument that you see when you're looking at traction, when you're hearing from a company for the first time?
So I think when people are talking about market size, the only thing that investors are thinking about is this big enough, right? Is this going to be something that can get to a size where somebody else wants to buy it? As simple as that, right? That's the main reason that investors are looking for like a market size number. What they really want to understand from an early stage entrepreneur is, do they know their customer? Do they understand what is it that they are building, right? And two is this idea of sales, right? If you don't get your customer, how are you going to be able to sell to them? How are you going to teach a whole sales force to go out and sell to them, right? So I think, given that quite a bit of early stage startup life is about sales, you can call it sales or marketing or any of the other things that you want to, but all of it comes down to just that initial process by which you kind of find the customer and convince them to buy your product or solution, right? And you should do that in the most unproductive way possible in the early days, right? So do it by going to their door, spending time talking to them, learning about them. Being able to recognize that is going to be extremely valuable in the future when you kind of come up against hurdles when you're going to the next stage, right? So if you don't know your customer today, very small chance that if you're going to have like millions of customers, you're going to get to know them better, right? Then you're just basically kind of hoping that things will work out. So I think when a lot of times when we are talking to entrepreneurs, all we are trying to see is, do they understand the market and the customers that they want to kind of work with and get to, and how excited are they to be working with these customers?
Yes, very useful. I wonder if anybody else has any kinds of questions they'd like to ask. I know how it usually goes. People are a little slow at first, and then, by the time where it's time to hang up, there's 30 people hanging on. So I would encourage people to, even if you have a question that doesn't seem so relevant, I think that this is a great time to just have a chat amongst all of us, especially while Karthik is here. I see Siddharth has turned on the camera.
Yes. Again, thanks for this presentation and the advice that you have offered so far. Since you mentioned about the finding customers, especially from passionate customers, since we are talking about land restoration and climate change, and at some point possibly presenting it to the investor community as well, would it be possible to look for the investors as our first initial customers, not raising funds from them, but making them the partner, making them the clients of some of the projects that we are engaged in? Would that be a reasonable, because obviously they are in the impact investment space because of their passion. So would they be the ideal early recruits, if I may use that word, as a clients?
I don't know. So you'll have to ask them, right? Or ask us, right? Because I think, again, right, the question for you is not just about like how much money are you looking for, right? It's also about like how much of time and engagement you're looking for, right? And an investor, and most investors, maybe it's me too, right, are very bad in terms of their attention span, right? And what you want is engagement, right? And so I would recommend trying a few different, kind of personas or personalities, just kind of chasing investors. And let's say you do find them, they're so few and far between that I don't know if you would be able to kind of get that, right? But I think we just talked about like, presenting to TIE, right? So maybe the community that you're looking at are more the same as people who do angel investments, right?
Okay.
Or people who basically kind of look for opportunities to invest in products that give them not just returns but impact, and then there is some other angle to it, right? Can they do it for their local regions or something like that, right? So maybe if you're going and doing this work in Pune, or you're going and doing this work in Goa, like, are there investors or communities within that ecosystem who say, hey, if I'm going to put money and I'm going to get some returns, I'm even happier if it happens in my neighborhood, right? So I think some of those we have seen, right? So I think a lot of you know about like all these lease finance models and companies that are doing this, like Grip Invest and a bunch of others, right? They all go to HNIs and to investors to do this, right? It might be good to kind of ask them, talk to a couple of these different players who are already working with investors who provide small amounts of capital, somewhere between a lakh to 10 lakhs to a crore, and say, hey, how is it that you engage your investors? If we created a product, would you list that in your platform, right? So then your job is not so much to find investors, you're handing that off to somebody else, but you're going kind of creating products that Grip might be interested in listing on their platform.
Okay, Grip, you mean?
There's Grip Invest. There's a couple of them, right? There's Spice. There's a couple of them, right? So there are startups in the fintech space that are doing what you're talking about already, right? So you're not the first one looking for the HNI investor profile.
Glad to know. Yes.
A whole bunch of people looking for the HNI investor profile.
Yes. Okay. And finally, what I wanted your advice was so the carbon sequestration is going to be the major revenue generator for us. which means even if we plant trees, at some point we want to be selling carbon offsets on the carbon exchanges. So ideally, that would be our final customer, the carbon exchange, carbon markets, perhaps. So that is, in our view, a faceless customer, largely a faceless customer. So what would you advise? How should we perceive that market? How should we view that market? Is that even the right way of looking at that customer segment?
It's not a customer segment, right? That's just a market, right? That's a market where things are traded, where you need to meet a certain set of specifications. And if you do, then you basically have an opportunity to sell on that market, right? Unless you're going to a voluntary carbon market, in which case you need to again find the people who are interested in voluntary carbon offsets and be able to build that, right? But that is again then an exercise to go out, right? So for you, the important thing is to understand, do you want to just have that as a faceless B2B interaction, which has a certain set of rules by which you basically kind of are able to list and monetize, right? And I think keeping it simple might help you. On the other hand, like, maybe the voluntary carbon market in the long term might be more valuable than the regulated market, right? So I think that's a call that only you can get a sense of as you start talking to more people in those markets.
Right. Okay. Sure. Thank you. Thank you again for those insights. Thank you again.
Thanks for
I
all
see
the
a question
questions.
from Liz. Liz, are you available to unmute yourself?
Hi, Liz.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm in Kenya. It was very exciting to see my fellow Kenyans on your last slide, Karthik.
Oh, yeah. That's the
Yeah. So we're a health and wellness company, and we are using the Moringa oleifera, which is indigenous to your country.
Oh, and guys, Liz is an alumni, so she was part of our top 15 in 2021. So we invite all of our alumni to join us for any sessions they'd like to. So that invitation will also be going out to the top 15 this year as well. So go ahead, Liz.
Thank you for that intro. So we are using the Moringa oleifera tree to incentivize preservation of indigenous trees like tamarind and neem, and we are buying, and we have innovated some very interesting products. We have teas, we have pure powders, and we are selling locally. And we are also have export markets that we're exploring. And we are also selling bulk to the leading health shop in the country. So my question is, we have had the teas for quite a while, and we did a market research, and we got some very interesting comments from the research that we did. So we rebranded our teas. Before were in a brown loose bag. Before it was polythene, and then Kenya kicked out all polythene in a box. So we are now rebranding that. We have it in a sachet with a thread and tag. And we moved from, we realized some flavors were not doing well at all, generally across all the brands in the country. Like cinnamon it does not really go down well with Kenyans, other than the Kalenjins actually who run, apparently. So we have now first taken some of the ingredients, and like Ravinda said, some products now have moved from 3 ingredients to 5 ingredients. Some of the teas, like we had a slimming tea, but now we are calling it flat tummy, because flat tummy seems to be something that Kenyans are really focused on now. They don't want to lose anywhere else, just the tummy fat. So we have used that and Senna. And my question, so the teas were 7, now they're 8, and we've rebranded. They're beautiful teas. They're I've sent to buyers in Belgium, to Holland, and they are okay with the package, maybe just a different language for the different country. And my question is, when you have a range of like 8 teas, and when you are relaunching into the market, what would the focus be? Because that's a range. That's not a small range of teas. How do you narrow down to which teas to which of them to really be like the flagship?
I think you mostly answered your own question, right? Like you said, like some teas people don't like at all. Some teas are kind of very popular with people, right? So I think a lot of times people will always come for one or maybe two of your products all the time, right? Like I drink mostly chamomile, right? But then like I might just kind of, and I like one particular brand, but then when I go to the shelf and I see that brand has something new, I might try it out, right?
Okay.
So if you have a sense on what is driving your sales, right? And so if more than 60% of your sales are coming from a particular type of tea, would be good to kind of focus your marketing efforts on that, and then basically have all these others as options for the customer, right? And that might be different for different areas, right? So I think you talked about a marketing survey. I don't know if it was actual questions. Was it a tasting? Was it were you there talking to the customers as they were drinking the tea? How did that happen?
We did a questionnaire, and we administered it in different outlets in different parts of the country where our products are stocked.
Right.
But
So what I would
it was already during the COVID season, so there has not been sampling. Actually, the exhibitions and sampling has started, I think, maybe 3 months ago or 2 months ago in Kenya. So we've not been wet sampling of any product anywhere in the country other than eating in hotels. The public health had totally banned that. So possibly maybe when we do the product launch, before we do the product launch, we could the new teas.
Yeah, so I think what the best thing to do would be to actually, go out there and get people to taste it. And again, right, sample size matters. So get as many customers to taste as many different teas, and then kind of take feedback from them on what they like, what they don't like, and use that. And some of it, if you can hustle, even if you wanted to do something in Belgium, right? I'm sure you can find some Kenyans in Belgium, or like figure out a way to connect with some university students who will go and do this for you for like a low cost, right? But going out and doing this survey with any customer base where you're launching can be really valuable, so that wherever you're spending time and money on marketing, you can do that in a more focused way.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Of course, I see Rajesh now.
Hey, Rajesh.
Hey, hi, Karthik, good to see you, and thanks for coming down. I am based out of Tamil Nadu, and we are creating a project called Nannilam Eco Village. There are majorly two components. Portion is the managed farmland, and another portion is where what we are trying to create is a a co-creation space or a platform model, a physical platform model, wherein things related to sustainability and regenerative, we want to co-create with different entities and sustain the model and pilot this model in this region. So my question is just to get a feedback from you about this model, and also is there any case study which I can look into, or a similar project, something similar to this, which I can take a look into that to validate my model of what we are trying to do. So for example, if it's going to be on bamboo, right? So can we create a whole value chain in bamboo industry in that, so that not just this project is benefited, but the total there are about 1 lakh acres in the region where we work. It's a socioeconomically very backward region. And so is it any possibility that we can restore land by different means, by co-creating with different entities, probably micro entrepreneur, there can be entrepreneurs, there can be also multilateral agency. This is the idea which we have started this project with. So I just need to know your feedback on that. Thank you.
Sure. I think Liz was just talking about her business, right? Using moringa as the base, and then now they're doing teas. They also are looking at tamarind, a bunch of other things, right? So I think the key when you're doing a business which is rooted in the local community ecosystem, and you need to build a lot of credibility, awareness within the community for them to engage, especially when they're underserved and hard to kind of bring forward in terms of awareness, is to keep it simple, right? So if you think within a certain level of scale, you can just work with bamboo and create something big, then I would recommend keep, right? So if you can do this work across communities, that would be better in the early days than saying, hey, we will do bamboo here and we'll do neem there and we'll do something else somewhere else. Because the more complexity you have in your operations, more complexity you have in marketing and supply and everything else, the harder it's going to be for you to scale when a lot of the work that you're doing is around the community side.
Yeah, okay, sure, thanks. I get your point.
Right, and the opportunity there might be, let us say you're working with bamboo, being able to work with one big organization that says, hey, you're doing a great job. We will source all our bamboo from you and we'll give you like a fair price for it, right? So then your focus is then on community building and building this idea of how you can scale community building activities to a large kind of geographic base. And then once you have the geographic base, then you can start tinkering with like, hey, I want to, apart from bamboo, I want to add something more.
Sure. So kind of take one step at a time and develop one, get known for one product or one sector, and then move on to later. So this we want to do by co-creating with others. We don't want to do everything by ourselves. We can be a facilitator, or since we have the property and the land, we can experiment a lot of things in that. That is the whole idea. To as a platform model, we want to do that.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anything in the comments?
Ravinder has raised his hand. Hello, Ravinder.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah, hi Karthik. I'm sorry, actually, I'm taking too much of the airtime today, but I just need to ask certain things. Karthik, I just want to share my journey in terms of how I built this enterprise. It was the year 2014 and 16. I was doing MPhil development practice from Ambedkar University, Delhi. I was placed in a place in Chhattisgarh in Dhamtari district where I need to do the action research with the tribal community, right? So within while living with this community and doing my work, I realized that they have a very close relationship with forest. So what I did is that I started understanding what is the relationship with the forest, and then realized that most of their revenue do comes from other sources, but forest has got anti-FT products have got a major revenue, like Mahua was one of them. So we created a women collective there. There already Pradhan was doing their work, and they have their SHG already built. So I just like worked with them, and then we co-created this collective where we reap the economy of scale. We collected all the mahua in a village instead of selling it in a 1 or 2 basis. Those total of 75 quintals of mahua was collected at that village, and then they sold it out at the first time in the economy of scale to one of the traders at the higher margin, right? So then these villagers were realized that the collective has got a very good role to play in terms of realizing them the better market prices for the forest products, right? So, but at the same time, my actually journey ended there because my action research actually ended there. I came back to my place in UP. I belong to Prayagraj, Allahabad, and then what happened that, but I also encountered millets there at the first time in my life. They appreciated millets to me a lot, and it was something which kept in my mind. And then when I came back, when I started to do this entrepreneurship journey, I actually invented a product out of millets, right? So it was a cookie, as I already know. So now when I have a very separate type of operation where this collective has got not much to do with my work right now, but I wanted to actually go back to these villages and let them know the importance of millets and organic farming, and then collect them again, because they've already realized this collective works, right? Because even after my absence, they have tried to do the same thing again, right? So they are very much passionate about. And I also realize I'm a little bit people centric, so I realize that they have health problems. There many young people die there because of lack of health awareness and lack of nutrition, in fact, right? So how can I go back to that village when I have come into this? It's a private limited company. There is a lot of funds requirement. We need to. There are a lot of sort of like venture capitalists coming to me. They wanted to invest, but they have a time frame like 44 months. If I take their money, then I have to run from toes to like that, and then I will forget about going to the village and working with the village, because then it's a whole different sort of story. You have to be on the shelves of every stores, and it's a kind of like it's a whole market sort of economy, right? So how, as an entrepreneur like me, can actually who can support me in going back to the roots from where I've learned the art of what I'm doing right now, right? So how can I connect to them? This is my question.
Connect with whom? Investors or the farmers?
No, with the people, that women collective with whom I've worked with, where I've learned this art of entrepreneurship, because they in fact teach me what is entrepreneurship. They have invested their 60,000 rupees. They've taken so much of risk and they're living in so poor lifestyle. In spite of that, they have invested 60,000 rupees when we made this collective, right? So that was a risk that villagers have actually taken. So I've learned that my entrepreneurship from them. But how can I go back and repay to them and then sort of start this journey?
So couple of things, right? As shares, and anybody can own those shares and reap the benefits of it, right? So there's a lot of movement going on, especially in the US, around community-based, employee-owned businesses, right? So can your self-help group actually have a stake in your business where you ensure that if you're making returns, you can give back to them, right? So there's always an opportunity to do that, right? The other thing I would say is, the biggest thing you can do for these communities is to actually become big. Keep your values on how you work with the community together, but become big and meaningful where you can do more for them than what you can today, right? And no investor should be asking you for the money back in, like, I don't know, 44 months or 40 months or whatever that is, right? And I'm talking about the best of investors. Like, if you, there's a company in Delhi called Win Green Farms. I don't know if you have heard of them. They're
Can you
now
repeat
in
it because
practically
I've
every
lost?
kind of, I think they start. There's a company called Wingreen, WINGREEN, right?
Okay.
And WIN stands for Women Inclusive Network, right? And it's basically driven by a woman who wanted to help the women who were working on her farm to get better prices for their produce. And so she started with like making chutneys and a bunch of other things. One thing led to the other. And she said, somebody needs to do this work where, they get better prices. I can touch more farmers, more women who are working in the fields. And so she built the company. And I think if you go online and look for Wingreen's story, I'm sure they, in a couple of years, they will either get acquired or go IPO. But they are invested by Sequoia pretty early in their journey, and like the investors stayed invested and they've put in more and more money into the company, right? So the question for you is not so much, are there investors out there? There's surely investors out there as long as you can build scale and you have products that the customers love, right? And for you, you want to kind of keep that and also kind of create value to the people that you care about, right? And that will make you even more interesting to investors.
Right.
But that's on us as entrepreneurs and investors to basically stick around with the initial reason why you started this, right? And the great part is, I think your initial journey was mostly about like, spending time with your customers. So that's good for you.
Yeah, got it, Karthik. I definitely try to learn. But one part you said that how the private limited company can share the shares with the SHGs.
Yeah, they can own shares.
Okay. Okay.
Give to them for 10 rupees, give to them for free. Like,
Okay.
I think the question is, are they worth something, right? Now,
Right.
once you give them shares, then you need to work on making sure that those shares have value.
Right. Right. Got it. Got it. Got your point. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi. Hello, Karthik.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm Rajeshwar from Conco Nerves. So my question is actually on customer profiling, basically. So all that we have learned is when in our experience, it's easy to profile customers when we are in a B2C segment. I mean, there are many tools, and obviously social media is there where we can identify those customers and who is wanting our product directly. But the challenge that we face is mostly with industries, and especially identifying when we're selling into the B2B segment, on what the industries, on how to identify those, because often for us it boils down to the fact that those are paying us on debit or not on credit, so we usually go to them so that our money is not stuck in the market. So what can be these some other ways where we can identify industries? So specifically in our case, herbal and drug industries, whom we are wanting to sell and selling, how to typically identify those or profile those?
Industries are way more easier to profile than customers, right? They have a lot of their information published online. Some of them have websites, some of them are part of trade associations. So you will have like, some kind of a pharma, nutraceutical industry trade association that you can work with. You can go to your local CII chapter and find out how you can get connected to people in the industry. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to kind of find businesses which you can't when you're working with customers. Customers is actually harder than industries. What you will have with industries is more around so I think companies also have personas, right? So some are risk-taking, some are not. Some basically will want to try something new. Some will want to kind of have a certain level of credibility of the product before they buy it. They might have long testing cycles, all kinds of things, right? So everything has personas. So you can take the most inanimate thing and create a persona around it, right? So even if you're working with businesses, create personas. But what I was going to get to was once you find these businesses, let's say you find 10, right? Within that, you need to figure out how decision making happens within these customers. And that's where I think people miss out, right? Because you're basically finding some details and you're sending one email to info@xyzindustry.com, and you're hoping that they will all kind of come back to you, right? What you really need is to find who's the decision maker in that industry, and then be able to kind of get in there and figure out how to connect with them, right? And that's where networks matter. So finding somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody is the only way in, right? And that's essentially the work that founders, salespeople do, right? So you need to get in front of the decision makers. You might need to get in front of different people who are part of that decision-making process, right? There might be somebody who evaluates the product before it's purchased, somebody who basically sets the budget for what they want to purchase, somebody who at the top level in an SME, it might be the promoter or the owner of the business who makes the decision. In some other cases, it might be just a quality control manager who makes the decision, or in some cases, there will be a supply chain manager or some other thing, right? So depending on the type, scale, personality of the business, you're going to have different types of decision makers in the business, and each of those will have their own personalities as well, right? So you want to get in there, start talking to people, understanding how some of these businesses work, and hopefully what might be good for you is to figure out that a lot of these companies have similar organizational structures, and what you want to look for is a particular designation of a person who will get you into the door.
Great. Yeah, I think you nailed it with the point that sending mails to info ... doesn't really get us any response. So that is one of the challenges we are suffering with. I think, yeah.
But if you have 2 customers, go talk to them and ask them for 2 other references, right? Who else works with you, right? Go and hang out where they hang out. I'm sure they hang out in some conferences where other people also are from the same industry, right? You just need to figure out ways in which you get in front of people and then figure out a way to get them to give you some of their time.
Yeah. So getting the foot inside the door is one thing that we need to figure out, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So I want to thank everybody for their questions. We're officially 10 minutes over time, but that means there was a lot of interest here. So I want to thank to Karthik, and want to also put a plug out. Next week, I did send, you might have seen this morning, an invitation to our next week's session. It's going to be Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. It's going to be amazing. I think Luni Libes, who actually teaches our sessions for Africa, agreed last year to come join us, and we got a lot of rave reviews. So we invited him again, doing a pitch presentation. He's just got a really fun way of presenting, and he's going to share some templates, some observations he's had over the time He actually invests in Africa and has a holding company for 30 different food-based companies in Africa. So it's a different geography that he focuses on, but the lessons are the same. So I would really encourage everybody, 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday. You got the calendar invites. You know, if you didn't, you know, raise your hand and tell me about it. But that's the plug for next week. And just thank you guys so much for joining us today. And thank you so much to Karthik. And we will see you guys next week. It's really going to help you guys get to the top 15. If you can integrate some of these lessons and opportunities when you make your application. All right, thank you guys. Thank you, Krister. Good to see Liz and good to hear from like a bunch of different people today. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Amanda. Bye, Karthik. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda. Bye.